We're live. I'm Lisa Diane Kastner. I'm the founder and executive editor of Running Wild and Rise Presses, and I am here with the phenomenal Ricardo Jose Gonzalez-Rothi. And I hope I didn't just completely screw up pronunciation. Um, but we had the distinct pleasure to publish Ricardo's memoir, The Mango Chronicles. And first, I want to give you guys a little bit of info on it. In an entangled exodus to freedom during a nuclear missile crisis, a young boy's Cuban Huck Finn childhood is upended. After a decades long struggle with identity, he transitions from refugee to a good American, returning to his roots for redemption. He left his birthplace during a nuclear missile crisis, and as a refugee in a foreign land, he struggles to adjust to a new set of life circumstances. The author recollects his childhood in his Cuban barrio from the eyes of a child, and then decades later from the vantage of a grown adult. From stealing a rowboat and being nearly capsized by a Russian tanker, to befriending an old fisherman who tells him a haunting tale, to being bullied by a neighborhood thug, to cockfights gone wrong, to witnessing the plight of political prisoners during an invasion, to dealing with injustices of growing up in a machismo and homophobic culture, he led a Cuban Huck Finn childhood. Um, and uh, this was a must read according to Kirkus Reviews. So, absolutely fantastic, which does not surprise us whatsoever. Um, and Ricardo is an academic physician and scientific writer. Um, he has had his fiction, creative nonfiction, and poetry featured in multiple literary journals in the US and the UK, both in English and in his native Spanish. Born and raised in Cuba, he came to the United States as a refugee in his teens, achieved a distinguished career as an academic physician, emeritus professor of medicine, and former department chair in clinical sciences. And now his second career and passion is creative writing. So, first off, welcome. It is truly, truly our pleasure to have you as a member of our Running Wild and Rise community. And first, I have to ask you. So, what inspired you to write your memoir?
Well, first of all, let me just say I am thrilled to be here, Lisa, that you've given me an opportunity as an unknown author that Running Wild took the time to give me an opportunity and a chance to show my work. It's been an absolute pleasure for me. You know, for us old guys, it's not easy to break through. uh, yeah. so, what inspired me? Well, you know, I led a very busy life, and I've
Clearly.
always never had time to write. And one of the reasons I decided to retire was to spend some time doing so. But in the meantime, towards the end of my career, I was writing short vignettes about my life in Cuba.
Mm,
And a few people said, you know, have you ever thought about putting this into a book? And yes, I had, but I had to mull it over for a
mm.
while. I needed to land on a theme. I needed to just get it to gel, which is the way I do most things. It takes me a while to get through things.
Mm.
So as I put it together, um, the more I sat with it and cried over it and sweat over it, um, the more intrigued I became. And it's been a great opportunity for me to just, and an honor for me to be able to write this down.
Well, I mean, again, it's a complete honor for us to have the opportunity to get this out to the world. So, um, now I'm really curious because I know, especially such an expansive life. I mean, you have accomplished a lot, right? How did you land on that narrative thread? So for those who are watching who may not be aware, memoirs aren't actually the person's whole life, right? If that was true, we would be talking about, hundreds of thousands of pages potentially. A memoir is really identifying either a portion of someone's life that has like a narrative structure to it, or identifying a thread, as Ricardo correctly obviously stated, a theme or themes that take you through that individual's life, and typically culminates in some kind of a lesson or a learning for the uh, individual that the memoir is about, or that the reader then can also find um, some kind of solace or something that they can cling to. So how did you find that? And what did you consider? Because that's huge, right?
That's a hard one, and it has so many different perspectives and facets. I thought there are a lot of things that my wife and my two daughters don't know about me and didn't
Mm,
know about me. So I started jotting down single phrases of things about my life in Cuba
mm-hmm,
and notable events that stood out in my mind. And then as I pondered it, one thing became apparent, that my life in the United States was not easy. I
mm,
landed in a blue collar New Jersey neighborhood where people weren't always kind to me.
mm,
And I had to really do what most exiles and immigrants end up doing, which is you try to live like a chameleon. You
mm,
live a duality of a life, trying to intercalate who you are inside from your own culture and trying to belong in another culture. At
mm,
the same time, as it unfolded, I thought, well, the first part of the book, I'm going to write this from the perspective of a kid.
mm,
So the first half of the book is probably goes probably around my fifth birthday,
mm,
and then but it's mostly between like my eighth and 11th birthday, and
mm,
then as halfway through the so that is written as a kid would write it. I tried
mm,
to use the language of a kid,
mm,
who, by the way, I was very precocious as a kid. And hence the Huck Finn aspect of it. I got into a lot of things that I
mm,
probably shouldn't have gotten into, but I observed things about people and motives.
mm,
And it was just something that hung with me. And then the second half of the book, I reflect upon those things, and I try to incorporate things. And one of the things that came out was really this duality.
mm,
In order for me to be able to survive and move ahead, um, I started to realize that I had to remember to forget.
mm,
And by that, I mean, it
mm,
was kind of a selective blindness. My
mhm,
parents always said, oh, everything will be fine and we'll go back when things settle. Well, what does that mean? We're over half a century and things haven't settled there. In fact, they've
yeah,
gotten worse.
mm,
So I decided I just need to be in my adoptive country and
mm,
try to become a good American. And I
mhm,
selectively stopped listening to all the bad things that were going on in Cuba,
mm,
um, in order for me to just put my head to the plow and move forward.
mm,
But the second thing as it evolved is that during trying to become a good American, I got pretty resentful about a lot of things and the way I was
mm,
treated.
mm,
So towards the end, I have the dual theme of remembering to forgive.
mm,
So on the one hand, you have to remember to forget if you're going to make it through,
mhm,
but on the other hand, you have to remember to forgive, and that is really, as I came towards the end of the book, I thought, how am I going to put this together? And I
mm,
wrote an epilogue,
mm,
and the epilogue sort of links back to each of the chapters over the years,
mm,
some with an adult perspective. Um,
mhm.
does that explain it, or am I being too long-winded?
Oh, no, no, that was absolutely beautiful. That was perfect. And it's fascinating how you started with uh you selected to write the first third from the perspective of a child, because it really opens up um, not just the world of someone who's basically been forced to immigrate to a country that you didn't pick it, right? I mean, your parents,
Nope.
said, "Here you go, congratulations," and what various things brought you to that, because it really does open up a whole world for readers in many different ways?
Well, it was very difficult because when I started writing it, I had to really force myself to say I'm gonna try to remember what it was like when I was 5 years old,
Mm,
and I really would concentrate and try to think about that. I'm going to
mhm,
try to see what it smells like to be up on that mango tree where my friend Juanito and I would just sit there and just gouge ourselves
mm,
with mango juice. Bees would flitter around our hands. There was
mhm,
so much mango nectar.
mhm,
Um, and The good thing about that, as I realized, was that many books are written about being a refugee and an exile
mm,
that have a political zing to them. I
mhm,
didn't want to be this political zing.
mm,
My family was apolitical in Cuba. We left because we realized that our freedoms were being clamped down on.
yeah,
Uh, and so, so as a kid, I was not political, but I
mhm,
lived in a dictatorship that then turned into a communist dictatorship. And
mm,
I couldn't help but ignore that.
mhm,
In a few days, it'll be like the 50th or 60th anniversary of the Bay of Pigs.
yeah,
I, I lived about 60 miles from the Bay of Pigs.
wow.
Okay. And when the invasion took place, I I mean, I distinctly remember
Mm, it's
the tr-
okay.
the
It's all
truck
good.
the trucks, the military trucks. They had taken all these prisoners and they had hogtied them. And these
Mm,
guys were in the middle of a mosquito infested swamp. They hogtied them. They put them in these trucks, and they were sunburned and cut up and
mm,
had mosquito and bug bites everywhere. And everybody was booing at them and screaming at them. And Che Guevara was blasting on the
mm,
speakers, "These are the traitors of our country," blah, blah, blah. And it was hard to ignore that,
mm,
really hard.
mm,
Um, so, there were things like that. Um, but as I came to the United States, I just decided, I can't get caught up in the politics of it all.
mm,
And my mother and father said to me, after 50 years, most of the people that were born in Cuba were not, they didn't make a choice to be in this regime.
mm,
They were born into that country.
mhm,
Um,
mm,
and there are many people that are
mm,
refugees and that left the country probably around the time that we left. We left in 1963.
mhm,
Um, that are still very bitter.
mm,
Um, I'm not happy about what happened to me and my family.
mhm.
I abhor the communistic dictatorship there, but I can't put the blame on a 30-year-old kid who was born there through no fault of his or her own.
Right, right.
So, and my mother and
Mm,
father actually came to that conclusion. They said, we had to turn our house in. We had to turn my dad's grocery store in to the
mm,
government. It's part of the remembering to forgive, and
right.
that's so liberating. And
Mm,
I think for anybody out there who reads this book, what I wanted to get across is that sometimes life throws things at you,
mm,
and you get tripped up, and you say, "Oh me, oh my," and then what happens is you get so caught up and dominated by nostalgia that you
mm,
cannot move. You can't
mm,
move forward.
mhm,
So I hope that when people put this book down and they close it, they say, what would my life have been like if this particular thing had not gotten in my path?
hmm,
And that really struck me because I went back to Cuba in 2016 and I took my wife and my two daughters and their spouses
mm.
to find our house.
Wow.
And we did. And on the flight back, my wife looked at me and she said, "Are you okay?"
Mm,
And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "You ever stop to think what would have happened to you if you had stayed in Cuba?"
mm,
Boy, that hit me like a ton of bricks,
right?
right? I mean, my life wasn't pretty when I got here, but
Ooh.
Everything is relative, and I am just so glad that I was able to see that. And I
Mm,
hope I can share that with other people. It doesn't matter whether you come from another country, you can be born and raised here and suffer the same things that life throws at you. There's
mm.
always hope.
That was absolutely, absolutely beautiful. Um, is there anything that you want to I mean, I could talk to you for hours. So, um, but is there anything that you want to share with everyone? And just so everyone knows, this is live streamed across LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and then we actually upload it on TikTok as well. So if you're watching this and you want to share it, please feel free. Um, we the whole reason we do this is so that you get a feel for the author, and the author has an opportunity to share their personal experiences to the broader world. So, but is there anything else that you really want to share with those who may be watching?
Well, there's a lot of things I could say, but this happened to me the other day, and it was just terrific. I came across somebody who I had not known before, and we
Mm,
got to talking about. He's a writer, and we got to talking about you getting to be old, and how do you get to write, and all this stuff. And I said, hey, I can see the end of the runway. I'm not unrealistic about it, and I was
mm.
talking about the finality of life,
Right.
and
Yeah.
it's realistic. And he said to me, you know remember, the end of the runway is where flight begins.
Wow. That is gorgeous.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I will sign out.
And with that, thank you so much. This has been such a distinct pleasure.
Lisa, thank
Um,
you for giving me the opportunity. I really appreciate it. I would like for your wolves to take good care of you.
they're working on it. They
They're
are working
beautiful.
on it. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.